Are you fed up with the same old, tired, dual-wield punch recommendations for Ramza in Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles? Do you want to try something new and make him actually feel like a unique character, like so many people want him to be? Well, I have good news for you. That's what this build is here for, because it's my personal favorite one for him. My name is Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman, and welcome back to the channel. Hello everyone. If you enjoy what I do, including my ongoing coverage for Final Fantasy Tactics: The Ivalice Chronicles, whether that be news, guides, let's play streams, or what other could that be? Perhaps you'll find out. Then a like on this video and a subscription to the channel would be very much appreciated. Thank you so much. Also, of course, huge shout out to all of the direct supporters for the channel, whether they be on Patreon or YouTube members. Obviously, the stream that we've been doing has been heavily featuring your very characters, and I'm working on getting the rest of them into the campaign as quickly as I can. Thank you all so much for the continued support and helping keep the channel running through the ups and downs that YouTube is always eliciting. So what are we doing here today? Well, I've had a lot of requests for a Ramza build, specifically my Ramza build as a Geomancer Samurai, or Samurai Geomancer, depending on which way you want to flavor it. I particularly start with Samurai. I've talked about it before on stream, explained why I like it so much, and I do think it has a lot of merits to it, even if it's not the objectively strongest build, do 999 damage twice with dual-wield monk punch type of build. I think it's more fun than that. It's also a lot faster to get online, which is fun. So we're going to talk about why I like the build so much, what its functionality is supposed to be, and then show off what the build looks like at the early stages of Chapter 3, where I am currently at in my campaign, with a little bit of an example battle. There's a lot to go over here, so let's begin, shall we? Ramza is a very interesting character to build because he's an extremely strong all-rounder. He's got good starting Brave, he's got good starting Faith, he's got good starting stats and continues to have good stats because of his Squire class, having higher growth rates than other classes. He's just a very strong all-rounder that you can do pretty much whatever you want with, and he stays that way for the entire game. There's no one right way to build him, and it's because of those capabilities that I like to turn him into a bit of a spell sword. I'm a sucker for someone who can wield a sword and a shield, but then also throw magical effects around. Someone who can have a lot of utility that they bring to the battlefield while also being able to slay out in melee combat. And this build does exactly that. We start off in Geomancer and pretty much want to learn all of the Geomancy available. If you're going to use Geomancy at all, you want every single one of these abilities, and I imagine that's why they're priced pretty cheaply. $150 for each, you stack them all up as quick as you can, and then no matter what terrain that you're standing on, you're going to be able to deal okay magic damage at range and apply some status effects. People always really underestimate Geomancer, to be perfectly honest. Like, yeah, it's not the most damaging magical effect out there, but it is good chip damage at a very long range with an instant cast and no MP requirement, and then you can actually stack some beneficial status effects on top with surprising regularity, especially because all these abilities hit in an AoE. I also like that Geomancer gives you attack boost, which can be very nice on this build. It's not something that I typically use. I actually use another ability that we'll go over once I actually show Ramza's build here, but it is absolutely an option that I have used on the build in the past. For this setup in particular, I like to use Geomancy as an opening gambit, essentially while we're moving in on the enemy and no one's in quite close enough range for melee combat or the Samurai's abilities. Then you can start picking them off with Geomancy, maybe apply some status effects, and start moving the battle in a favorable direction for you, while really nothing else can affect you, and potentially the rest of your team can't affect anything either. It also synergizes very well with the stats that you want for Samurai, which, seeing as how that's pretty much the primary job that we're going to be building into, is a nice bonus. If you wanted to do something else instead of Geomancy, you do have options like Black Magic, White Magic, etc., because we are going to have a major focus on magic attack with this setup. Moving on from Geomancer, and once you've gotten the appropriate job levels, we can turn into a Samurai. And Samurai is a very interesting class that I think goes very underappreciated compared to some of the other late game jobs. The functionality of Samurai is very interesting. Not only is it a heavy melee class using big heavy katanas that scale off of your Brave as much as your physical attack, but it focuses almost entirely on being able to deal magical damage and doing magical support effects using katana. Essentially how it works is each time you learn one of the skills, you will have to have an associated katana in your inventory. It does not need to be equipped, just in your inventory, and then when you use that ability, there's a small chance that that katana will break. So it is a class that wants you to have a pretty decent stock of swords in the armory to be able to draw these spirits out of to trigger these magical effects. That said, the power of these effects cannot be denied. It starts with very basic AoE damage, and when I say AoE, I mean every square that is 2 spaces away from Ramza, which actually gives you a pretty big area of effect. And granted, this is for any character that's in Samurai, not just Ramza, but for the sake of this build, it's Ramza. Scaling all the way up to mass AoE heals, application of Protect and Shell, even heavier magic damage, applying slows, or occasionally, a big damage in a straight line, which could be good for catching a bunch of characters who've lined up and are unawares. It's a very versatile set of abilities, and with the right equipment and stat setup, can be way more effective at a myriad of support jobs than certain other jobs could be, all packed into one character, which gives you a ton of battlefield versatility, and it's nice to have some support roles on Ramza, because that is kind of how his whole shtick works. He's not a fancy Holy Knight, he's not a fancy Fell Knight, he's just a good-hearted dude who's drawn a lot of people to his cause through sheer charisma and morals, and having a job that can kind of follow that logic is really fun. As far as the gear that Samurai brings to the table, this is very key, as it uses all of the same sort of heavy armor and robe options that Knight uses, while then also wielding katanas, which again function like Knight swords in that they scale off of both physical attack and brave. And you naturally are going to have high brave on Ramza, because at some point, if you're not using his steel ability on himself to strengthen his soul, then you're going to be screaming from the top of your lungs like Goku when you hit chapter 4 and get shout, just because you want the physical attack and speed buffs, and then also you will naturally end with maxed out brave. So it's a great weapon class to have on Ramza that synergizes well with his other class abilities. Once you have this build fully online, you have an incredibly capable main character, seeing as how you have to have him in every main story battle, and you'll be able to rely on the fact that you always have Protect and Shell on hand that can hit your entire party at the start of the map, barring certain deployments. You have the ability to heal your entire party with a massive amount of healing in an AoE instantly. There's no charge time on any of these. You have huge AoE magic that cannot be evaded and is non-elemental, so you're able to deal damage to everything and anything extremely consistently. And you're also wielding heavy armor and can do damage in melee. It is the guaranteed all-rounder job setup, which I think very well suits the guaranteed all-rounder character that Ramza is. Plus, it kind of gives you that cool idea that he does have a nice, unique job of his own to stand alongside Fell Knights, Holy Knights, and the like. As far as the build itself is concerned, this is what I am currently set up with. We are just outside Orvan Monastery before we're about to go and do that series of battles, so that is the level of gear that I currently have available to me. This is very much an in-progress setup. There are only so many katanas that I can get, meaning there's only so many abilities that I can use. That is one limitation of the build as you are progressing it. However, if you're making regular story progress and not just grinding constantly forever, you will have everything that you need at this point in the game. As far as our equipment is concerned, we have the following. The Ame no Murakumo, because it's just the physically strongest katana that you can wield. There's really no difference in any of these early katanas at all, beyond just one of them has better physical attack. Like, you can go through, you've got the Ashura, you've got the Kotetsu, the Bizen Osafune, the Murasame. The Ame no Murakumo is going to be the one that has the best physical attack. They all have the same parry chance. They don't have any bonus effects. So you just want to equip the one that has the highest physical attack power for where you're at in the game. Now, I also have an ice shield, which requires us to have equip shields. We'll talk about that in a moment. A close helmet, a wizard's robe, and a mage power gloves. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, I thought this was supposed to be a heavy armor job. Why are you using robes? Well, again, as mentioned, we have an entire ability set that scales off of your magical attack. So, being able to equip robes that do boost your magic is actually a very powerful option for the samurai job, and it's part of the reason that I want to be in the samurai job when doing this setup. At this point in the game, the wizard's robe is the only robe that you can get that increases your magical attack power, unless you're able to get lucky and steal a more powerful robe from a random enemy that has a higher tier item, but the wizard's robe is very good for that. It doesn't have great HP or MP, but we do get that magic attack boost, which does mean that we're going to be doing a lot more with our various different Iaido abilities. This is equivalent to a 20% boost in power because it goes from 8 magic power to 10 magic power due to this robe. We also have the mage power gloves for the same reason, also gives +2 magic attack power. Because we have movement +1, and we'll go over our abilities in a second, we don't need boots. You could make an argument for things like the red shoes that give you more movement, but you have 1 less magic attack. You could also make the argument for the diamond bracer because it would give you more physical attack. You'd still get magic attack. You would also be immune to slow. It depends on how much you're expecting on actually doing melee combat with this job. but I like the Mage Power Gloves because personally I love to spam Iaido abilities. We have the Close Helmet because it's just the highest HP helmet that you can have at this point in the game, and we definitely need HP. And then again, we have the Ice Shield. Now, the Ice Shield is an interesting choice, and part of the reason that I have equipped shields at all is because I want to have a little bit of an increase in defense, since we have less HP than you might expect for a heavy armor job at this point in the game. It's the Ice Shield specifically because our primary Black Mage, Kelvin here, is primarily using the Blizzard series of spells. So, with this shield on Ramza, we actually have the ability to get a bunch of free healing if needed because we can absorb ice. It also means that we have fire damage, which is phenomenal with the number of bombs that are in random battles. We are weak to lightning, but lightning is not something that you really encounter that often, especially in random battles, so it's a pretty decent trade-off overall. Later on in the game, we will still be using equip shields because I want to get an Aegis shield on Ramza, which is one of the best shields that you can get and also gives you magic attack. So again, even more damage and even more healing for our Iaido abilities. Speaking of which, let's talk about our abilities here. We, of course, do have Iaido. The Samurai Job command releases the spirit in a katana to attack enemies and aid allies. This will sometimes break the katana. Now, right now, we have Ashura, Kotetsu, Bizen Osafune, Murasame, and Ame no Murakumo. Ashura and Kotetsu are generally not going to get used at this point in the game, as we want to be using Ame no Murakumo as a damage option. This is going to be the strongest attack that we have in terms of raw damage, and also has the chance to inflict slow, which is very, very nice. If we're just trying to like whittle enemies down, let other characters get kills, Ashura and Kotetsu do still have their uses, of course, but if we're going whole hog and really being serious about it, Ame no Murakumo is what we're going to be using. We also have Bizen Osafune, allowing us to drain MP from surrounding foes, which especially on Tactician is extremely important because enemy mages are vicious, and because of like the way damage mitigation has been changed and everything, you're not guaranteed to be able to just outright kill them if they're charging something, so being able to steal their MP instead is nice. And then Murasame, invoke the Rain of Wisdom, the spirit of the Murasame, raining tears of an enlightened soul to restore HP to oneself and surrounding allies. This is an extremely potent heal. I have footage here that I'll have either earlier in the video or now or whatever, where you can see I'm getting big like 120 heals when I have mainly characters with no more than like 180 health in a huge AoE that can fit the entire party. This is an extremely potent healing ability that cannot be underestimated, and it scales well into the future because of the way that magic attack scaling works with Samurai, because you can get so much gear that boosts magic attack. I love this option. I use it a ton. Later on, once we get better katanas, we'll be able to get things like Kiyomori, which is what gives us Protect and Shell, as well as Masamune that gives regen and haste to the user and surrounding allies, which is insane. And then, of course, even more damage options that have various bonus effects and targeting and the like. Going along with that, we do have Geomancy, and I do have Geomancy entirely mastered on Ramza at this point, with all the various different effects that you can have for every single different type of tile in the game. This is, again, more of just a support option. It depends on what battlefield you're on, for what status effects you're going to be able to inflict, what element of damage you're going to be dealing, but it's just nice to be able to target something at such long range. 5 range is very, very strong in this game, especially given the fact that you can hit in a plus-shaped formation, so it's a good way to just start chipping down at enemies. In the battle that I'm going to be showing off, you'll see that I'm not actually able to target the bombs that are in the enemy front line because we were using Tremor and they're floating, so you're not going to hit them with ground effects, but most of the time, it's going to be very reasonable for you to be able to do a decent chunk of damage to the enemy before they're even in melee range. We then have Shirahidori. Shirahidori is still to this day one of the single most broken reaction abilities in Final Fantasy Tactics. When receiving physical attack, the unit's parry rate is the same as its bravery value. This means right now, I have the ability to essentially avoid 75% of attacks that come my way. Not magic, but attacks. And that's going to make Ramza extremely durable, especially alongside his shield. It's going to be very, very easy for him to avoid most melee attacks, and even some ranged attacks, because of this setup. And that means that it's far safer for us to be using robes over plate armor to get that HP bonus. We then do have equipped shields to be able to use shields. There are plenty of other options you could go with. As I talked about earlier, again, attack boost from Geomancer is great. There's a lot of other potential choices as well, but for this setup currently we do have equipped shields, and then we have movement +1. We do want a movement ability here, seeing as how we're not currently using any boots, and you do want to be able to get into melee fairly quickly to be able to use your AoE Iaido skills. If I have the time and the ability to grind it up, we will eventually want to get like move +2, maybe even teleport from different jobs. But right now, at this point in the game, move +1 is fine. And that's pretty much the build as far as Chapter 3 in the early game is concerned. There is a lot of different gear that you'll be able to get and start putting towards Samurai as you move through Chapter 3 and definitely in Chapter 4, but this is a pretty strong setup for where we're at in the game currently. As far as an example battle is concerned, we have this one here in the Zeklaus Desert. Now, as I mentioned in the previous segment, you're not going to be able to see the effects of Geomancy really at all, because usually the targets that you're going to be using Geomancy on will be the targets that are in the front line of the enemy formation if they have a more standard first line, second line type of formation going on. Here, because we're on sand, we're using Tremor. Tremor doesn't affect bombs because bombs are floating and that avoids ground type damage, but it does give us the opportunity to hang back instead and use some buffs. And later in the game, once we get access to the ability that allows us to apply Protect, Shell, Haste, Regen, etc. to our entire team, we may very well choose to do that anyway at the beginning of a fight like this. As far as the rest of the fight is concerned, I mean, the evidence is right in front of your eyes, right? As soon as we get in melee range, we can start popping AoE magic damage. If the team takes any major damage from things like, oh, I don't know, a bomb self-destructing, we can immediately pop a massive amount of healing to get everyone back on their feet. It's very, very versatile. We never really have to worry about any sort of physical damage. What magical damage we take, we can then easily heal up either by using our own healing or being targeted by ice magic or whatever flavor of magic you choose. If you have a different shield you choose to equip or a different robe or whatever, you have options there. It's very strong, despite the fact that it doesn't have quite as much tankiness in raw stats the way something like Knight would. And again, this is a very basic example. The abilities and strength of Samurai scales so much as you make progress through the game because you get such better equipment and because you're actually able to use abilities that you don't have access to earlier in the game because of the whole, like, need to be able to buy the different katanas that you can get unless you're grinding in a specific way and can steal them from enemies and yada yada yada. Like, Samurai scales all the way through the end game and only gets stronger the further that you go. And that's one of the things that I love the most about it. With this setup, I can drop Ramza into any fight, random battle or story fight that he needs to come along on, and know that he is going to be doing not just something, but a lot to keep the team going. And because the setup is so versatile, it means that I have a lot more flexibility with what I can do with the rest of the team. I don't necessarily need someone with white magic to put Protect and Shell on. And hell, he can do it to everyone with one ability, rather than having to wait for the charge time and use the MP to cast 2 different spells. Ramza can keep the entire team alive and let them keep attacking and doing damage rather than spending their turns healing. And when you have so many strong characters that join later on, you do really appreciate some guaranteed support in that capacity. And then if there's a big clump of enemies and you need to be able to deal some damage, boy howdy, Ramza is going to deal some damage. He might deal more damage than like the Holy Knights and things like that. He can really slap as well. Even if you're having range or height issues, Geomancy can deal with that. It's got some of the best range in the game. It's got no restrictions based on height. And there's always times where you're going to just get a random stop or petrify or something else on an enemy that completely cripples them. Disable is another one. And you're just like, all right, well, cool. That's just free cherry on top. This just got even easier for us. It's a build that has a lot of spice to it. It has a lot of play to it. And while it might not be the top dog for raw single target damage, I like that it adds so much capability for team building for the rest of your party while still being so capable as a result. Because Ramza is a hero. He should be on the front lines. He should be getting his hands dirty. He should be really butting heads with the enemy. He's not just going to be in the back line being an orator, although that would also be a fun build for him. And with this, even though he does not get a very special, unique class of his own, he still is able to feel like it. And I really enjoy that from a sort of lore perspective. And there you go. That's my Spell Sword Ramza build. I love playing Ramza this way. I have played this game 24 times or more at this point over the course of my life, and of all the different builds that I have done on Ramza, this is always the one that I default back to. I just enjoy it so much. There's so many different ways that you can do it. Like, if you don't even want to mess with Geomancy, Metal works well here, especially once you're able to get a certain spell late in the game. Because you have all this magic attack for Samurai, that also works really well. And then you can do all of the self-buffing stuff. Like, Samurai likes everything that you get from Shout. It wants the speed, it wants the physical attack, it wants the magical attack, it wants the brave. It feels like Samurai was a job that was made specifically for Ramza, and then they just gave it to everybody else as well. And I absolutely love that about it. If you try this build, or you've done variations of it yourself that you think warrant some discussion because you had a different piece of gear or a different secondary job or whatever that played really well, do please tell people about it in the comments. I would love to see more people doing fun stuff like this. Or if you have your own particular build for Ramza with some other completely random out there set of jobs that works extremely well, let us know that as well, because there is so much you can do with this character. He doesn't need to have a fancy job as ordained by the church or anything like that to be an absolute weapon, and I think that's really cool. That said, though, I'm going to start wrapping this one up here. My name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. Thank you once again to all of my direct channel supporters. You've been seeing their names scroll by on the right side of the screen. It would be far, far harder to keep this channel running through all the ups and downs over the course of every year without that support, so thank you to each and every one of you, especially all the new members and patrons that have been joining because of Final Fantasy Tactics. That is amazing. I hope you stick around for a good long while. And until the next video, my name has been Tom, otherwise known as Titanium Legman. I hope you all have a good night. Stay safe and healthy out there, everybody. And remember, be good to each other, y'all. Bye now.